Hey, I'm Ryan Reynolds.
Recently, I asked Mint Mobile's legal team if big wireless companies are allowed to raise prices due to inflation. They said yes. And then when I asked if raising prices technically violates those onerous two-year contracts, they said, "What the f*** are you talking about, you insane Hollywood ass?" So to recap, we're cutting the price of Mint Unlimited from $30 a month to just $15 a month.
Give it a try at mintmobile.com/switch.
$45 up front for 3 months plus taxes and fees. Promo rate for new customers for limited time. Unlimited more than 40 gigabytes per month. Slows full terms at mintmobile.com.
It's Saturday the 25th of May. I'm Ciara Evans, and this was a week that saw rain-soaked Rishi finally announce a general election. The Infected Blood Inquiry report published, the ex-Post Office CEO in the witness box, and Kevin Costner knocking on boats in Cannes.
Grab a cup of something hot, put up your feet, and get up to speed on the 7 biggest stories of the week. This is the Standout 7 from the Smart 7.
It's news,
but not the news.
The International Monetary Fund paid a visit to the UK this week with a review of the economy, and they seem pretty positive as they upgraded the UK growth forecast, but also warned against any further tax cuts. Best of all, they projected that if inflation stays at 2%, there could be as many as 7 rate cuts between this summer and the end of 2025, which would make a huge difference to mortgage holders. IMF Managing Director Kristalina Georgieva said there's definitely light at the end of the tunnel.
Actions of the UK authorities, combined with favourable energy price developments, are paying off. The economy is growing and soft landing is in sight.
Wednesday morning saw the publication of the latest inflation figures. They came in at 2.3%, which was still somewhat higher than expected. And even though the headline number is the lowest for 3 years, service inflation and property inflation remain high. Chancellor Jeremy Hunt was still cautiously optimistic that interest rates are on the horizon.
But I think the mood music is that they do feel that we've turned a corner on inflation, and the Bank of England governor is confident that we will move into cuts in interest rates.
The lower inflation number, along with the positive review from the IMF, seems to have been enough for Prime Minister Rishi Sunak to finally make a decision on an election date. He chose the 4th of July as the date, which means just 6 weeks of campaigning, and sees him facing a Labour Party that is currently 21 points ahead in the polls. Wednesday was a day of drama as Westminster speculation mounted, with meetings cancelled and David Cameron summoned back from a trip to Albania. Then finally at about 5:15, the podium appeared outside number 10 and Rishi emerged into the pouring rain.
Now is the moment for Britain to choose its future, to decide whether we want to build on the progress we have made or risk going back to square one. Earlier today, I spoke with His Majesty the King to request the dissolution of Parliament. The King has granted this request, and we will have a general election on the 4th of July.
Given that the government had spent over £2 million on a custom indoor briefing room, having the Prime Minister stand outside while protesters blasted "things can only get better" didn't seem like the best way to start a campaign. In fact, it's hard to sell the idea that you're the party with the plan when Rishi Sunak is standing in the rain and didn't even bring an umbrella. Not long after that, Labour leader Sir Keir Starmer appeared indoors and unmolested by music from protesters to deliver his election message. And he's focusing on a simple message.
Now, it will feel like a long campaign, I'm sure of that. But no matter what else is said and done, that opportunity for change is what this election is about.
After rain-soaked Rishi became an instant meme, the Prime Minister dried himself off and hit the campaign trail on Thursday morning with a blitz of media interviews and appearances around the country. It turns out the speed at which the election was called means that there are almost 100 constituencies which haven't even selected a Tory candidate yet. Labour leader Sir Keir Starmer was staying focused as he made his first campaign stop in the Labour target seat of Gillingham in Kent.
This election is for you, because you now have the power, the chance to end the chaos, to turn the page and to rebuild Britain.
The snap election has also had an impact on some of Rishi's signature legislation, with the smoking ban, no-fault evictions and a new football regulator all falling by the wayside. Rishi also admitted that it's unlikely that any flights for Rwanda will leave before the election, but he was much more interested in pushing his attack line on Labour and taxes.
The only certainty you get with the Labour Party, when I talk about certainty, is that they will run out of your money and they will put your taxes up, as clear as night follows day.
Thursday saw the Lib Dems officially launch their campaign with a focus on kicking out the Tories as leader Sir Ed Davey called for a transformation of our broken politics. Lib Dem Deputy Leader Daisy Cooper was also happy to rule out any kind of voting deal with Rishi's team.
So we have ruled out doing any deal whatsoever with this Conservative government because it is really quite clear that there are lifelong Conservative voters who can no longer stomach voting for this Conservative party. This is the campaign of a lifetime and we'll be fighting every single second of every single day and we won't let up until 10 p.m. on polling day.
This week saw the long-awaited report from the official inquiry into infected blood scandal finally published. The inquiry was originally set up by Theresa May in 2017 and has spent more than 6 years interviewing witnesses, civil servants, politicians and medical experts. More than 30,000 patients were given infected blood products in what has been described as the biggest treatment disaster in the history of the NHS. Sunday Times political editor Caroline Wheeler has been covering the story for 25 years. She says the investigation began from a tip-off from a member of the public.
And a chap called Mick Mason called me and told me the most extraordinary story about how he had been infected with hepatitis C and HIV and had recently received a letter telling him that he may also have been infected with variant CJD, which at the time was known as mad cow's disease.
Labour Shadow Health Secretary Wes Streeting said under a new Labour government there'll be new rules which would see any manager who tries to silence a whistleblower fired.
One of the things that concerns me, both about the contaminated blood scandal, but also about the ongoing silencing of whistleblowers in the NHS, is that we still have a culture of cover-up.
Monday morning saw the report published and it reviewed 50 years of NHS decision-making around blood products and found that safety had not been paramount and that patients were exposed to unacceptable risks. At least 3,000 people have died as a result of infected blood products, and Sir Brian Langstaff, the chair of the inquiry, said the scale of the issue and the slow response from government was horrifying.
People put their trust in doctors and the government to keep them safe, and that trust was betrayed. And then the government compounded the agony by telling them that nothing wrong had been done.
He was heavily critical of the prolonged cover-up of the scandal, saying that this disaster was not an accident. Clive Smith of the Haemophilia Society says that having the details finally uncovered will be a huge relief for victims.
They've had to bang government's door for decades to say, you need to have an inquiry, you need to uncover all this wrongdoing. And finally today, Sir Brian Langstaff shone a light on one of the darkest chapters in this nation's history. And so for many people, it's vindication, it's pain and regret. Some people in there today have found it too difficult to read.
Speaking in the Commons, Prime Minister Rishi Sunak offered a wholehearted and unequivocal apology to victims and their families as he described the scandal as a decades-long failure that led to a day of shame for the British state.
Mr. Speaker, today is a day for the victims and their families to hear the full truth acknowledged by all and, in the full presence of that truth, to remember the many, many lost loved ones.
Chair of the inquiry, Sir Brian Langstaff, in an unusual move, has made it clear that he views the inquiry as still active until the government acts upon his recommendations. Labour leader Sir Keir Starmer recognised that the scandal spanned multiple governments and that it was an institutional failure.
To every single person who has suffered, that in addition to all of the other failings, politics itself failed you. That failure applies to all parties, including my own. There is only one word: sorry.
The government followed up with details on Tuesday of a proposed compensation package for victims. They suggest that those affected could receive payment of more than £2 million each, with an initial payment of £210,000 to be paid over the summer. The package will eventually include not just victims but their families and loved ones who've been affected, and the total cost could rise to about £10 billion. Prime Minister Rishi Sunak wouldn't comment on the timeline for payments, but he said it was important for victims' voices to be heard.
They have waited an incredibly long time for justice and for the truth, and that's why I rightly, as Prime Minister, offered an unequivocal apology, and I'm glad that their voices could be heard and that they received the apology that they so rightly deserve.
Greater Manchester Mayor Andy Burnham, who was a former Health Secretary, has apologised for his failure to set up an inquiry and said he wasn't aware of the scale of the cover-up and that there should be consequences for those involved.
The failure here is a systemic one. I mean, I would also say that people should look very closely at whether there's a case for individual prosecutions, but overall, the system let people down.
This week saw Israeli troops continue fighting in northern Gaza and in the eastern suburbs of the city of Rafah, even as the war of words between members of Israel's war cabinet intensified. Cabinet Minister Benny Gantz threatened to resign if there's no clear plan laid out for Gaza after the war has ended. He set out 6 goals he'd like to see achieved, but Prime Minister Netanyahu dismissed his comments as washed up words that would lead to Israel's defeat. Meanwhile, there was a warning from the UN's humanitarian chief Martin Griffiths that shortages of food and supplies in Gaza will lead to apocalyptic consequences. Cindy McCain of the World Food Programme said it's unacceptable that Israel continues to blockade.
Either an inability to get in or a miscommunication, from wherever it came from. And we get stuck at a checkpoint, and by the time the sun comes up, people figured out we're there and they loot the entire convoy. I'm not faulting them for looting. They're hungry. And we should be able to get in a way that's at scale and unfettered.
In a surprise move, the chief prosecutor of the International Criminal Court, Karim Khan, announced on Monday that he's intending to apply for arrest warrants for both Hamas and Israeli officials. There have been rumours circulating that warrants for war crimes and crimes against humanity were a possibility, but the speed at which the prosecutor moved took many by surprise. He's seeking warrants for 3 top Hamas officials, including Yahya Sinwar and Mohammed Diaf, and also for Israeli Defence Minister Yoav Gallant and Prime Minister Netanyahu. The move attracted condemnation from US President Joe Biden, who described it as outrageous, while Secretary of State Anthony Blinken says the US fundamentally rejects the move. The UK's Foreign Office also opposed the proposed warrants and questioned whether the ICC has jurisdiction. But Prosecutor Khan was clear in his intentions.
My office charges Netanyahu and Gallant as co-perpetrators and as superiors in the commission of these alleged crimes. Israel, like all states, has the right to defend its population. It has every right to ensure the return of hostages that have been criminally and callously taken. Those rights, however, do not absolve Israel of its obligations to comply with international humanitarian law.
The United Nations had to suspend food distribution to Rafah on Tuesday because of a lack of supplies and an unsafe situation for aid workers. No aid had arrived via the new US-built pier either, after raids on aid trucks meant security has had to be re-evaluated. Meanwhile, there was further reaction to the International Criminal Court's plan to issue warrants for both senior Hamas figures and Israeli Defence Minister and Prime Minister Netanyahu. US President Biden said the intervention by the ICC is not helpful.
Whatever these warrants may imply, there is no equivalence between Israel and Hamas, contrary to allegations against Israel made by the International Court of Justice. What's happening is not genocide.
Benjamin Netanyahu also spoke out on Tuesday, framing the warrants in an unusual historical context.
It's a rogue prosecutor who's out to demonize the one and only Jewish state, is equating Israel's democratically elected leaders with the terrorist tyrants of Hamas. That's like saying, well, I'm issuing arrest warrants for George Bush, but also for Osama bin Laden.
Wednesday then saw a potentially dramatic shift in the politics of Israel's war on Hamas as 3 European countries announced that they're set to recognise Palestine as a state. The move is intended to open a path towards the much-discussed 2-state solution when the war in Gaza finally ends. Ireland, Spain and Norway coordinated announcements of their intentions in a move that was immediately rejected by Israel, who recalled their ambassadors from all 3 countries for consultations and described the move as playing into Hamas's hands. The US position is that the Palestinian state should be recognised after negotiations, but Irish Taoiseach Simon Harris says that he's confident other countries will join the trio and announce recognition.
On the 21st of January 1919, Ireland asked the world to recognise our right to be an independent state. Today, we use the same language to support the recognition of Palestine as a state.
This week saw former Post Office CEO Paula Venables make an extended appearance in front of the Horizon inquiry. She was in charge between 2012 and 2019, a period where prosecutions of sub-postmasters continued, even though there was mounting evidence of wrongful convictions, and internally the Post Office had become aware of flaws with the Horizon IT system. She spent 3 days in the witness box and was under intense pressure, breaking down in tears at one point on Wednesday. She was directly accused of lying to MPs when she testified in front of a Commons committee and said that every prosecution over the Horizon IT system had been successful.
I fully accept now that the Post Office, the Post Office knew that. Personally, I didn't know that, and I'm incredibly sorry that happened to those people and to so many others.
She apologised to all of the sub-postmasters and their families and said she wished she had known more at the time. Lord Arbuthnot, who's a member of the Horizon Compensation Advisory Board, was unmoved by either her tears or her apologies.
Astonishing. The question is it credible? She was either telling the truth but displaying an incompetence of gargantuan scale, or she was not telling the truth.
On Thursday, she was back in front of the Horizon inquiry and had to answer questions over suggestions that she and the Post Office executive team had sought to protect the board from dirty laundry, and it was clear from emails presented that the focus was on managing the media. There was also extensive questioning on a review of the Horizon issue that could have brought the whole scandal to light 10 years earlier, but it was killed off in July 2013. Reynolds was keen to deny that she had killed the review because of a fear of legal cases or because, in the words of one advisor, it would be front page news.
At no stage did I make the link between these 2 to 3 cases and being able to reach a view on the system and being able to complete the whole piece of work. It was not trying to close anything down. It's really important that I say that.
Still to come on the Standout 7, a helicopter crash kills the Iranian president, and Kevin Costner has been busy in Cannes.
Right after this. Ryan Reynolds here from Mint Mobile. With the price of just about everything going up during inflation, we thought we'd bring our prices down. So to help us, we brought in a reverse auctioneer, which is apparently a thing.
Mint Mobile Unlimited Premium Wireless. How to get 30, 30, bit to get 30, bit to get 20, 20, 20, bit to get 20, 20, bit to get 15, 15, 15, 15, just $15 a month? Sold!
Give it a try at mintmobile.com/switch.
$45 up front for 3 months plus taxes and fees. Promo rate for new customers for limited time. Unlimited more than 40 gigabytes per month. Slows full terms at mintmobile.com.
Welcome back.
After a dramatic search and rescue mission on Sunday night, Monday morning saw confirmation that Iran's President Ibrahim Raisi, Foreign Minister Hossein Amir Abdollahian and several others were killed in Sunday's helicopter crash in northwestern Iran. Drone footage was shared by Iran's state news agency of the site where the president's helicopter had apparently crashed in bad weather. Raisi was a famously hardline figure close to Iran's supreme leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei and the man behind the recent assault on Israel using drones and missiles. His death saw a tribute from Russian President Putin, and the UN Security Council also held a minute's silence to mark his death. That didn't impress the US, with Pentagon spokesman Matthew Miller making America's views on the matter clear.
Some of the worst human rights abuses occurred during his tenure as president, especially the human rights abuses against the women and girls of Iran. That said, we regret any loss of life. We don't want to see anyone die in a helicopter crash. But that doesn't change the reality of his record, both as a judge and as the president of Iran, the fact that he has blood on his hands.
A 73-year-old British passenger died on Tuesday as a Singapore airline flight from London to Singapore hit a pocket of extreme turbulence. The man, who was on his way to Australia with his wife for a holiday, is believed to have had a heart attack after the plane dropped about 6,000 feet in a period of 3 minutes. Photos and videos show chaos in the cabin and more than 20 passengers, including 6 Britons, remain in critical condition with head and back injuries. The incident occurred during meal service, and it appears the injured passengers had unfastened their seatbelts. Singapore Airlines has apologised for the traumatic experience. On this week's episode of the Sunday 7, we look in more detail at the events and explore why turbulence is becoming more common. The plane had to divert to an airport in Bangkok, where the general manager, Kittipong Kittikachorn, spoke to the press.
It was chaotic, but most of the passengers received small injuries. The Deputy Prime Minister and the Minister of Transport have asked us to look after all the passengers according to the international standards.
It was good news for fans of modern Western series Yellowstone on Monday. They finally started filming the last 6 episodes. There's still no word on whether Kevin Costner is returning. In fact, he's been pretty busy in Cannes promoting his own Western called Horizon, an American Saga. It's the first of 4 movies, and it turns out Kevin has had to finance them himself, and he estimates he's put $38 million of his own money into the first 2. So while he's probably avoiding the reviews for the first one, which haven't been great, he's also been busy with a unique financing plan.
I have made the second one, and now I'm trying to make the third one, and I've knocked on every boat in Cannes to help me. They, come, we'll have a picture. I said, no, come get your checkbook out. I want to see.
You've been listening to The Smart 7. We'll be back tomorrow at 7 a.m. Hit that follow button and have a great day. Give us 7 minutes, we'll give you the world.
The biggest names in tennis are coming to Paris for the most anticipated Roland Garros in years. Tennis Channel Plus is your place to watch. Stream every court from your phone or smart TV live in HD. Experience 3 weeks of unparalleled tournament access as the world's top players in tennis face off against each other. Will the veteran champions continue their dominance, or will a fresh face emerge to challenge their legacy on the clay courts? Daily live coverage of this epic showdown begins Monday, May 20th. Don't miss a matchup. Stream it now with Tennis Channel Plus to be there when it happens.